Once upon a time, beneath the roots of an old apple tree, there lived a little country mouse. His home was small, but it was warm. The walls were made of packed earth and soft moss. A tiny acorn cap hung by the door for a lamp. His bed was tucked inside a hollow root, lined with thistledown, dry leaves, and a bit of sheep's wool he had found near the meadow fence. Every morning, the country mouse woke to bird song. He would stretch his paws, sniff the fresh country air, and step outside into a world of golden fields, whispering grass, and flowers that nodded in the breeze. He did not have much, but what he had, he loved. For breakfast, he might nibble a barley grain. For lunch, he might find a fallen berry. And for supper, he might enjoy a few crumbs from the farmhouse kitchen, a sunflower seed, or a tiny piece of cheese carefully saved for a special day. And every evening, when the sky turned pink and the first stars appeared, the country mouse would sit by his doorway and listen to the crickets sing. "It is a quiet life," he would say, and then he would smile. One bright afternoon, while the country mouse was sweeping his little floor with a feather, he had heard a knock at the door. The country mouse peeked outside. Standing beneath the apple tree was his cousin from town. The town mouse wore a fine little jacket, polished shoes, and a tiny hat tilted neatly over one ear. His whiskers were brushed, his tail was curled, and he carried himself as though every path were a grand road made just for him. "Cousin," cried the country mouse, "what a wonderful surprise!" The town mouse smiled. "I was passing through the countryside," he said, "and I thought I would visit." come in," said the country mouse. "You must be hungry after your journey." The town mouse stepped inside and looked around. He saw the mossy walls, the root bed, the acorn lantern, the little table made from a flat stone. He tried to be polite. "How charming," he said. The country mouse hurried to prepare the finest meal he could offer. He placed a barley grain on the table, then a few crumbs of brown bread, then a dried pea, then half a hazelnut. And because he loved his cousin dearly, he brought out his best treat of all, a tiny piece of apple, sweet and soft from the orchard floor. "There," said the country mouse proudly, "a proper feast." The town mouse sat down. He looked at the barley. He looked at the pea. He looked at the little piece of apple. Then he looked at his cousin. "Is this what you eat every day?" he asked. The country mouse nodded. "Well, not every day," he said. "The apple is special." The town mouse took a polite nibble. He chewed slowly. Then he sighed. "Ah, dear cousin," he said, "you are kind, very kind, but you do not know what you are missing." The country mouse blinked. "What do you mean?" "In town," said the town mouse, "there are cupboards taller than trees, tables covered with cakes, cheeses, jams, bread, fruits, biscuits, and crumbs of every kind. There are carpets soft as moss, curtains thick as winter leaves, and warm places to sleep behind the walls." The country mouse eyes widened. "Truly?" "Truly," said the town mouse. "You must come visit me one evening in town, and you will never look at the dried pea the same way again." The country mouse looked around his little home. He loved the apple tree. He loved the meadow. He loved the sound of crickets at night. But he was curious. And sometimes curiosity opens a door. "All right," he said, "I will come." So the two mice waited until the sun slipped low and the shadows grew long. Then they set off together. The country mouse had never traveled so far from home. They crossed the meadow. They slipped beneath the fence. They hurried past the sleeping cow. They followed a stone wall, crossed a dusty lane, and finally reached the edge of town just as the moon climbed into the sky. The country mouse stopped. Before him rose tall houses with glowing windows. Wagons rattled over the stones. Voices echoed in the streets. Somewhere a bell rang. Somewhere else a door slammed. The country mouse tucked his tail close. "It is very loud here," he whispered. The town mouse laughed softly. "That is only because it is alive," he said. "Come along." They squeezed through a crack in the garden wall, darted across a courtyard, and slipped into a ground house through a small hole near the kitchen door. Inside, the country mouse froze. He had never seen such a place. The floor shone in the moonlight. Silver dishes sparkled on the shelves. Their air smelled of butter, sugar, roasted meat, and fresh bread. His whiskers trembled. The town mouse smiled proudly. Welcome, he said, to town. He led his cousin through the kitchen and into the great dining room. There, on a long table, were leftovers from a magnificent supper. There were crumbs of white bread as soft as clouds, bits of yellow cheese, a spoonful of jam shining red as rubies, a crust of pie, a slice of plum, a fallen almond, and near the edge of the plate, a piece of cake with frosting still clinging to it. The country mouse could hardly speak. I have never seen so much food, he whispered. The town mouse climbed onto the table. Then you must begin at once. The country mouse followed. He tasted the bread. It was soft. He tasted the cheese. Oh, it was so rich. He tasted the jam. It was sweeter than any berry he had ever found in the field. He nibbled the cake, closed his eyes. Oh my, he said. The town mouse grinned. You see, this is how one ought to live. For a little while, the country mouse almost agreed. The room was warm. The food was wonderful. The table seemed endless. But just as he reached for another crumb of cake, a terrible sound filled the room. The door opened. Light spilled across the floor. The town mouse gasped, Run! The two mice scrambled from the plate, raced across the table, and leapt down onto a chair. They slid to the floor just as a maid entered the room carrying a candle. The country mouse's heart pounded. He followed his cousin under a cabinet and held his breath. The maid looked around, shook her head, and left. The room grew dark again. The country mouse trembled. What was that? Only the maid, said the town mouse. Nothing to worry about. Nothing, said the country mouse. She was enormous. The town mouse brushed a crumb from his jacket. You get used to it. The country mouse was not sure he wanted to get used to it. Still, the town mouse climbed back onto the table. There is plenty more to eat, he said. The country mouse hesitated. The cake did smell wonderful, so he followed. They had only taken a few more bites when another sound came from a hallway. Soft footsteps, slow footsteps, padding footsteps. The town mouse went very still. The country mouse whispered, What is it? The town mouse did not answer. A pair of green eyes appeared in the doorway. Then came whiskers. Then a pink nose. Then sharp white teeth. It was the house cat. The country mouse squeaked. The town mouse grabbed his paw. This time they did not run. They flew across the table, down the cloth, over a spoon, under a chair, behind a curtain. The cat sprang after them, claws scraping the floor. The two mice squeezed through a tiny crack in the wall just in time. The cat's paw swiped the opening, but it could not reach them. Inside the wall, the country mouse pressed himself against the darkness. His heart beat so fast he thought he might shake the dust from the beams. The town mouse took a deep breath. That, he said, trying to sound calm, was a bit more serious. A bit, cried the country mouse. The town mouse straightened his little jacket. But we are safe now. The country mouse listened. Beyond the wall, the cat sniffed and scratched. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The country mouse closed his eyes and thought for his apple tree. He thought of his mossy walls, his acorn lantern, his barley grain, his quiet doorway, the crickets singing softly in the grass. And after a while, the cat wandered away. The town mouse smiled again. Well, he said, shall we go back for the cheese? The country mouse stared at him. Back? Yes, said the town mouse. The cheese was excellent. The country mouse shook his head. No, cousin. I thank you for your kindness. I truly do. Your food is rich, your house is grand, and your table is filled with more crumbs than I could ever dream of. The town mouse tilted his head. But, I would rather have a barley grain in peace than cake in fear. The town mouse said nothing. The country mouse placed a paw gently on his cousin's shoulder. You are welcome beneath my apple tree any time. I may not have frosting or jam or silver plates, but I have quiet nights, safe sleep, and a door that opens to the stars. For a moment the town mouse looked thoughtful. Then he smiled. Perhaps, he said, there is something fine about that after all. Before dawn, the country mouse began his journey home. He slipped out through the garden wall, crossed the empty street, hurried past the sleeping houses, and followed the road back toward the fields. As the town faded behind him, the world grew quieter. The stones became dirt, the walls became hedges, the sharp smell of smoke became the soft scent of grass. By the time the sun rose, the country mouse could see his old apple tree standing at the edge of the meadow. His heart lifted. He ran the last few steps and slipped inside his little home. Everything was just as he had left it: the mossy walls, the root bed, the acorn lantern, the tiny stone table. The country mouse sat down, took out a simple barley grain, and nibbled it softly. It was not cake, it was not jam, it was not cheese from a silver plate, but it was oh so good. Outside, the morning breeze moved through the apple leaves. Birds sang in the branches. Somewhere in the grass, a cricket gave one sleepy chirp before settling down for the day. The country mouse smiled. Home, he said softly, and from then on, whenever he ate his simple supper beneath the roots of an apple tree, he remembered the grand house in town. He remembered the shining table. He remembered the rich crumbs. But most of all, he remembered the cat. And he was glad for his quiet life, because a peaceful heart can make even the smallest meal feel like a feast. So the little country mouse lived happily in his cozy home beneath the apple tree with the stars above him, the meadow around him, and sweet dreams waiting at the end of every day. Good night, stargazers. And if you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Whisperline Narrations for more stories like this one.